But hello everyone, my name is Seán Smyth. As Anna has said, I'm a recent graduate, being last week, from the Bachelor of Education programme at Dublin City University, which is a very large class, so there's 400 plus students in the cohort. And I suppose just before I start, I do want to extend my gratitude for presenting here. It's my first conference presentation, so I'm delighted to be here. The presentation you can see on the front or from the title of the paper is going to focus on the student experience, and it will namely focus on the main opportunities and challenges that were faced by large class students during the provision of emergency remote teaching during the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the presentation today kind of has just a brief introduction about our research that was conducted, but then go into the methodology of our research, and then a discussion which will kind of, I suppose, talk about the main opportunities and challenges, but also bring in some advice that hopefully you'll be able to bring into your teaching in the forthcoming academic year, because I suppose I'm no immunologist, I think is the word, but I would speculate that there will be some sense of online teaching next year for large class students in particular. So I suppose what is our research? It was research that was funded by the DCU COVID-19 Research and Innovation Hub, which was set up last year around April time, I think. And it was really designed to address the key challenges that were arising globally from the pandemic. So there was science projects and everything, but we fell under the technology project, namely to do with large class teaching. So the project team, I'll see some of the headshots, you may recognize some people, but the team was made up of 6 members, myself included. So there was Anne-Marie, Karen, Mark, Rob, myself and Suzanne, and between the 6 of us, there was a mix of lecturers, learning technologists, and student representatives, or representative. I think you can spot the student representative on the team, but actually, I will correct myself because I think 5 of us were students, so technically there was more than just me. But the research aims, really, I suppose the purpose of the research was threefold. We really wanted to examine the sudden transition from the face-to-face to the online context in March 2020. And I suppose it was, the purpose of that was really to just, I suppose, look at the innovation that went into moving large classes online, because it wasn't easy, particularly over a weekend. So really just to illuminate the innovation there. And I suppose we also wanted to, or when we were looking at the sudden move online, we really wanted to contextualize the perspectives of staff and students by reviewing relevant literature. And that was, you'll see in the methodology, that formed a huge part of it. And then that was all done. So those 2 steps really all done to inform the work of DCU academics, but also the academic developers that were supporting them in the endeavour of moving large classes online. And I suppose that was looking forward to the current academic year, so the 2021 academic year. So the methodology, like I said, the research was evaluative, so really wanted to just highlight that innovation. And there was 3 key sources of data. So the first was a rapid systematized literature review, which was done over 2 months, and it kind of looked at UDL, it looked at large class pedagogy, but it also looked at the immediate response to the pandemic in higher education. There was also staff, I also just realized the numbers are 112, that should be 123. The second, I suppose, was a survey of large class staff and students in DCU. And then the third was data relating to professional learning offerings that were made available to large class staff. And that was really just to see what, I suppose, resources large class educators were using when moving their classes online. I suppose, fortunately for me, I'm an advocate for the student voice, and in this research project, the student voice was central, which obviously I'm a student, I was on the team, but also a large class student survey was one of the key data sources. So you can see from the slide there, about 343 students definitely completed our survey. And that was from a range of faculties in DCU, so you can see them all there. And that really just meant that the perspectives, I suppose, we got weren't just one specific program, it was across GCU, which was great to see. But I suppose why I'm here today, what were the main findings of the research? So I'm going to look at one of the kind of main opportunity and the main challenge over the next 2 slides. So I suppose the main opportunity itself was the increased flexibility and accessibility of remote learning. And I think you can, just looking at the research data, about 32%, so 108 students that were surveyed indicated that flexible asynchronous learning was the most advantageous aspect of online learning. And I suppose that's just under a third of respondents to our survey, which really highlights the huge opportunity that it is for students. And the same is also evident in the staff survey. So you can see in the staff survey that staff have identified recorded lectures as a really good aspect of online learning. And I think you can see, like, in this response, that like the recorded lectures were perceived as really valuable for students because they could revisit it at any time, but also that students with maybe accessibility or language issues, they have additional chances to really engage with content, or they have more accessible ways to engage with content. And I think it's still on. I probably have subtitles because I saw it come up on my screen this morning. That's a really great aspect of Zoom in particular, and it's probably across um the synchronous and asynchronous recording tools. You can have closed captioning, which you don't have in person. So that's a really good aspect of remote teaching. And I suppose you're probably asking, what can I do for the forthcoming academic year? And I know things have already been implemented so far, so well done on behalf of students. Thank you as well. But I suppose if you're looking forward to see what else can you do, I think providing a balance between asynchronous and synchronous learning is really good. It gives students a chance to engage in real time, which can obviously cut down on maybe your email inbox, or it just gives students time to communicate with their peers, but also with you to ask questions, etc. And I think if you're looking at really effective ways to balance that asynchronous, Fiona Gibbon, I was reading her paper on the flipped classroom in the online space, that really looks at that balance, which is really, really good. And I think she's presenting later, but I'm not too sure. I also recommend, I suppose that's why we recommend as well, that recorded lectures, or that synchronous lectures are recorded, because that gives a chance that, yes, you have that synchronous time, that real-time communication, but if it's recorded, people can also look back on it just if something happens and you can't attend. So it just gives chances students to tune in later. The main challenge, I suppose, in online teaching was the disconnection and isolation that was felt by students. And I think that's often, literature says it's often felt by students, but it's obviously heightened as a result of the pandemic when you're learning alone in whatever room in the house you're learning from. And I think if you look at our research data, you can see that 65% of students either agreed or strongly agreed that they felt more isolated in the online class context, which I think, like, that's the majority of respondents to our survey. It's a good chunk of students, and I think that really indicates how much of a challenge it can be. And then, like, if you're looking at staff perspective, if you're looking at the staff survey, 85% of staff felt a strong feeling of disconnection with their students, and 56% reported less personal interaction with students in the large class online teaching context. And that obviously feeds into the sense of isolation that is felt by students. And it really supported the rationale behind our research. I suppose that large class educators, they need some support to decrease that sense of isolation faced by students. Because obviously it's a team effort, but the supports need to be there, which is why we conducted our research to see what we could do. And if you're looking at the next academic year, what can you do? One thing is to establish a strong teacher presence, and that's something that's talked about by a lot of researchers, particularly Nihei et al, and that's referenced in my paper, I think, today, and it's definitely referenced in our full report, which I'll put the link into the chat later. That looks at online pedagogy, and it really examines teacher presence, which is really important. So I would recommend looking at that resource. But something to even just establish that strong teacher presence is something like recording a video, like a short introductory video for your class, that can really help students feel less alone. Thanks, Anna, and more engaged with the online class. And I suppose in a hybrid approach, when you might have modules face-to-face and you might have them online, that introductory video will have students still as tuned in as they would be for a face-to-face module, which I think is really important. So just before I finish, I will put the link into the chat to the guidance document on our full report. I would really recommend that you look at it. I would hope that it's not the thing that you need to depend on in a year's time. Hopefully we'll be back to face-to-face, but even have a look and see what you can bring into your face-to-face teaching from that document. I think what I've learned this year, and one of my key takeaways, is that the virtual learning environment now is much more important than it was before. It's not a surface anymore, it's a mode of teaching. which I think looking at the guidance document, see what you can do to even change that for your in-person teaching or to support your in-person teaching. The guidance document has 4 sections there: curriculum, teaching, learning, and assessment, and 2 categories of immediate actions you can do and ongoing actions. So I know I'm close up on time, so I'll leave it there. If you have any questions, my email is on screen. I think a lot of the people our research team members are in PHELC at the minute, so you can chat to them, or you can contact me on Twitter as well. That's my app there. So thank you very much, and I will stop talking.